It looks like just a regular stone, but it's essential for today's needs. Your phone, your car, your country's missiles, they all run on a handful of metals most people have never heard of. Rare earth elements, and right now one country controls nearly all of them. China processes roughly 90% of the world's rare earths. It mines them, it refines them, and when trade tensions flare, as they did last year, Beijing doesn't hesitate to weaponize that dominance by slapping export controls on the very materials the modern world runs on. So where does the West go to break free? The answer is a region most Americans can't find on a map, but one that could reshape the global economy. 5 countries: Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan. Sandwiched between the bear and the dragon, Russia to the north, China to the east, and underneath their feet, what may be the largest untapped reserve of critical minerals on the planet. This is Central Asia, and it's about to become the world's most important battery. I'm Bruce Pannier. I've spent 4 decades covering the former Soviet Union. This is the Turan Research Center, hosted by Yorktown Institute, where we break down geopolitics of Turkey, Iran, the Caucasus, and Central Asia. If you're new here and want more analysis like this, please like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's get into it. Before we talk about Central Asia, we need to understand why these metals matter, because the global economy literally cannot function without them. Rare earth elements aren't actually rare. They're found all over the world. What's rare is the ability to extract and process them at scale. Mining them is expensive, refining them is toxic, and the entire supply chain from raw ore to usable material is dominated by China. The numbers tell the story. The global rare earth market was estimated at roughly $4 billion in 2024. By 2030, it's projected to hit over $6 billion, driven by electric vehicles, renewable energy, advanced defense systems, and microelectronics. And these aren't optional ingredients, they're essential. The smartphone in your pocket, the laptop on your desk, the electric car on your driveway, F-35 fighter jets, Virginia-class submarines, Tomahawk cruise missiles, Predator drones, smart bombs, all of them depend on rare earth elements. So do the wind turbines and solar panels that are supposed to power the energy transition. Here's the problem. China knows exactly how much leverage this gives them.
中国政府依法依规开展稀土相关物项的出口管制工作。
Last year, Beijing tightened export controls on rare earths and related materials twice, including samarium, a key component in precision-guided munitions. The controls require export licenses and include presumptive denial for defense-related end users. Translation: if you're building weapons that might threaten Chinese interests, good luck getting the materials you need to build them. As one former White House advisor put it, China can effectively forbid any country on earth from participating in the modern economy. That's not hyperbole. That's the current state of play. And it's why the search for alternatives has gone from a policy discussion to a strategic emergency. Few Americans could find Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan on a map, but these countries have quietly shaped the modern world for centuries. Kazakhstan is the birthplace of the Apple and the site of the first ever space launch. Uzbekistan's medieval astronomer, Ulugh built the most advanced observatory of his time in Samarkand, charting the stars with uncanny precision long before Galileo. It's fitting, then, that this region now sits at the frontier of another revolution. Central Asia occupies one of the most geopolitically complex positions on Earth. Russia presses from the north, historically dominant, militarily present, and deeply suspicious of Western engagement in what Moscow still considers to be its sphere of influence. China pushes from the east, already the region's largest investor with over $63 billion in cumulative investment and growing control over extraction and processing. Between the bear and the dragon, 5 countries are trying to chart their own course, and they have something both powers want. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, Central Asia contains 384 identified rare earth deposits. Kazakhstan alone holds 160 of them. Uzbekistan has 87, Kyrgyzstan has 75, Tajikistan has 60. But those numbers are misleading if you read them as equal. Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan are the heavyweights, with the reserves, the infrastructure, and the political strategy to develop them.
They use this competition between external powers to attract capital, technology, and infrastructure without locking into a single bloc. So it can hold the medium term, but is inherently fragile. As geopolitical tensions increase and some kind of dependencies deepen, external pressure will take neutrality harder to sustain. So in this connection, I think it's really important to see that Central Asian countries not just looking for new countries to come and extract their geological deposits. No, they are looking for new, as I mentioned, technologies.
Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan have deposits but lack the capital, technology, and processing capacity to develop them independently. And Turkmenistan, with just 2 documented deposits, is barely in the picture. Kazakhstan's State Committee for Geology now estimates the country's projected rare earth reserves at 28.2 million tons, placing it second globally behind only China. As Kazakhs like to say, we have the whole periodic table under our feet. And they're not exaggerating. Kazakhstan holds deposits of tungsten, magnesium, lithium, copper, tantalum, minerals that the U.S. Geological Survey classifies as high or elevated risk for supply disruptions. The region holds deposits of many of the very elements China has placed under export controls: yttrium, scandium, erbium, europium, samarium, lutetium. Much of Central Asia remains underexplored. The full potential is still being uncovered, often ironically with geological data originally funded by Western development assistance and scientific partnerships. U.S. taxpayers helped finance the surveys that identified many of these deposits, and yet today, it's other nations racing to capitalize on those discoveries.
Western countries like the United States and the European Union helped Central Asian countries, mostly to Kazakhstan, to endeavor these geological surveys, but didn't help in the way of to establish large-scale processing capacity and secure integrated supply chains. So in this way, we can see that China has already built a complete ecosystem, from mining to refining to manufacturing.
Beyond the minerals themselves, Central Asia offers something most alternative sources can't: willingness to handle the messy middle of supply chain. The real bottleneck in rare earths isn't mining, it's refining, the complex, dirty, multi-stage chemical process that turns raw ore into usable material. Western countries shy away from it due to the environmental and political sensitivities. Central Asian countries don't. Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan already have mature extractive industries, technical expertise, and governments eager to build local processing capacity. And there's a route to get the refined product to market. The Trans-Caspian International Transport Route, also called the Middle Corridor, links Central Asia to Europe via the Caspian Sea and South Caucasus, bypassing both Russia and China entirely. The infrastructure is there, the reserves are there, the political will is there. The question is, who shows up and on what terms? Each Central Asian country is approaching the rare earth opportunity differently. And those differences matter because they reveal how the region is navigating the pressure from great powers while trying to build something on its own.
Regional coordination is possible but currently limited. So each country follows a different economic logic and stage of development. Kazakhstan focuses on investment and research hubs, Uzbekistan on industrialization, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan on resource access through external partners. This creates a partial cooperation, but basically it's also competition for investors too. So coordination will grow only if shared infrastructure and joint processing projects become more economically attractive than national strategies.
Kazakhstan is the clear leader. It extracts 19 of 34 critical raw materials the European Union considers essential. Its most significant asset, Kyrgyzstan coal field, holds reserves of 800,000 tons of potential resources, approaching nearly 1 million tons. President Tokayev has ordered at least 3 new enterprises dedicated to rare earths production and processing within 3 years. Exports of rare earth elements have quadrupled since 2020. Kazakhstan's strategy is to attract foreign investment from every direction and play partners off of each other. The U.S. signed a memorandum on geological exploration in 2023. The United Kingdom signed a strategic mineral partnership the same year. France formalized a roadmap for rare earth cooperation in 2024. South Korean experts identified a lithium deposit in eastern Kazakhstan worth an estimated $15 billion. And at the Central Asia EU Summit in April 2025, European Commission President von der Leyen and President Tokayev discussed creating a regional center for rare earth elements in Astana.
The European Union, for example, when it comes to critical raw materials, is a completely different partner. We have a different approach. We think it's absolutely important that you create the value, the added value locally, so that it creates jobs and that the added value chain is within the country of origin. We think this is better for our partners in the long term, and it is also better for the European Union.
Kazakhstan is doing what smart middle powers do, making itself indispensable to everyone while dependent on no one. Uzbekistan is taking a different approach, building domestic scientific and industrial capacity alongside international investment. President Mirziyoyev has set a target of developing $500 million worth of rare earth projects.
The identification of more than 2,500 mines and over 3,000 promising fields in our country, with a total estimated value of approximately $3 trillion, is evidence that Uzbekistan possesses an enormous mineral resource base. In recent years, we are carrying out major work to develop these reserves and, on this basis, give a powerful impetus to the growth of our economy.
South Korea helped establish a research center for rare earth metals. Japan has purchased a uranium mine and invested hundreds of millions in mining ventures in both Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. Memoranda have been signed with both the EU and the United States. And in 2025, 76 projects totaling $2.6 billion were announced. Uzbekistan isn't just opening its doors, it's trying to move up the value chain from a raw material supplier to integrated producer. During President Mirziyoyev's meeting with U.S. executives on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, he engaged with Traxys, F.L. Schmidt, the Colorado School of Mines, and McKinsey. Traxys signed a $1 billion framework agreement. A new mining training center was announced. McKinsey and the Uzbek government finalized a strategy to modernize the entire extractive sector. Kyrgyzstan possesses significant reserves, concentrated in the Talas, Batken, and Kamin regions.
Birinci, özü üçün Kırgızistan titana magnetiti. Bunu tazalayız.
But faces a harder reality. It lacks the domestic technology to extract many of its own minerals. In February 2025, the government signed an agreement with a Chinese company to develop the Kutusai field, underscoring a dependence on foreign technology that Bishkek is trying to diversify away from, but yet can't escape. Talks with South Korea's SK Hynix on semiconductor-grade metals signal an effort to broaden partnerships. But China remains the dominant player. Tajikistan is betting on its neighbors. Rather than competing for global attention, Dushanbe signed a memorandum in August 2024 with Kazakhstan's national atomic company Kazatomprom for joint exploration, extraction, and processing of rare earths and uranium. Its partnership with Russia in the mining sector deepened during President Rahmon's visit to Moscow in March 2025. Tajikistan's approach is pragmatic. Use regional integration to compensate for what it lacks in capital and technology. However, Tajikistan does lead in one mineral, antimony, which is crucial to lead-acid batteries, flame retardants, and some types of ammunition. Dushanbe supplies 25% of the world's antimony and has been key to US and European supply chains amidst Chinese export restrictions. In summary, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan are the region's anchors, attracting Western investment, building processing capacity, diversifying partnerships. Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan have resources but remain dependent on outside help to develop them. Turkmenistan, for all practical purposes, is absent from this story. The rare earth revolution in Central Asia is really a two-country engine with regional passengers.
Сейчас страны Центральной Азии напоминают невесту, вокруг которой кружится большое количество женихов, и каждый из них что-то предлагает. На самом деле, да, и США, Европейский Союз, страны Персидского залива, Турция, даже Индия, которая тоже активизировалась в последнее время, да, они постоянно сейчас предлагают региону подключиться к разным проектам, предлагают инвестиционные определенные проекты. Понятно, что сейчас определенные приоритеты у этих стратегических игроков тоже появились немножко нового плана, в частности, так называемая новая нефть, это редкоземельные критические материалы, сейчас это сильно такая любимая тема, которую все обсуждают на всех саммитах, будь это с участием США, Европейского Союза или Китая и других стран. Вот, то есть с точки зрения инвестиционной привлекательности, да, Регион может сейчас попытаться привлечь инвесторов и, по сути, привлекает из разных стран. Но насколько эти инвесторы долго задержатся, это другой момент. То есть это зависит именно от внутриэкономической, внутриполитической ситуации в наших странах.
Central Asia is now a front line in the global competition for critical minerals. And the scoreboard tells a clear story. China's cumulative investments in Central Asia exceed $63 billion.
China is able to do the major investments they've been able to do in Central Asia, in part purely by geography. They're much closer to the Central Asian states, but also because the Chinese Communist Party essentially can direct all of the country's firms to invest where they think it's strategically prudent to do so. The United States takes a much different approach. We don't do the state-backed capitalism. It's more regular capitalism, although I think we're seeing the kind of nascent steps to what a US model could look like in investing more heavily in Central Asia, involving some elements of the US government. So China obviously has quite a big footprint in Central Asia, in the investment landscape and in the mining landscape as well. But the game is certainly not over. And the US and the West more broadly need to act more quickly, because these are opportunities that are open to US firms, to Western firms, but they're not reserved for them.
European partners, an estimated $8.2 billion. That's a nearly 8-to-1 advantage. Beijing isn't just buying minerals, it's building integrated production chains, controlling extraction, processing, and transport. In Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, Chinese companies already dominate most of the productive capacity in the rare earth sector. Brussels has invested 2.5 billion euros in new mining and processing projects across Central Asia. Germany alone has committed $500 million to lithium extraction in eastern Kazakhstan. The EU's pitch is different from China's. It's offering technology transfer, sustainability standards, and partnerships that go beyond raw material extraction to include local processing, infrastructure development, and education. Central Asian governments are actively pushing for this model. They want the EU to move beyond importing raw materials and instead help build domestic capacity. Unlike the Chinese model of large-scale loans and asset purchases, the European approach is supposed to be grounded in environmental, social, and governance principles. Whether that difference in approach translates to competitive results remains to be seen.
The quality of infrastructure and backing, and the fact that the US government would be involved, but also understanding that it was a good idea to not give everything to China, and understanding that the Chinese government can be overbearing in some ways and might look for a bit of leverage over these countries, so it's good to diversify. And so I think you'll continue to see countries, especially like Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan that you mentioned, looking for partners from all over the world, not only the United States and Europe, but countries like Turkey, South Korea, Japan, Gulf states, to try to get as many equities in their economy as possible to stabilize.
The United States has also stepped up its engagement, though it entered the race later than either China or the EU. Both Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan competed for U.S. attention at the United Nations General Assembly. Kazakhstan signed a $4 billion deal for locomotives. Uzbekistan purchased Boeing 787-9 Dreamliners for $8.5 billion. Washington has invested in domestic processing capacity and is fostering partnerships with allied producers. But the scale of American engagement in Central Asia's mineral sector still lags well behind both Beijing and Brussels. And Central Asian capitals are watching closely to see whether U.S. interests translate into sustained commitment or remains episodic.
In Kazakhstan last year or the year before found what could be the world's largest deposit of rare earth elements, which is a huge signal to American mining majors. And we've also seen Astana look at making a commitment toward decreasing costs of things like railroad, shipping across the Caspian, more regulatory incentives, and making those regimes easier for companies to navigate. And so now I think we have a better sense of what the fundamentals of those projects are. It's not perfect yet, but a better sense. And we see the governments, especially the one in Astana, with a clear commitment toward facilitating exactly these investments. So now I think you are seeing genuine American, especially, but also European interest in potentially developing some of these areas.
Here's the risk nobody in the region wants to talk about. Each Central Asian country is pursuing its own strategy. Kazakhstan is courting every investor on the planet. Uzbekistan is building domestic capacity. Kyrgyzstan is leaning on China. Tajikistan is leaning on its neighbors. Each approach makes sense individually. But without coordination, these divergent strategies risk weakening Central Asia's collective bargaining power. If each Central Asian country competes against the others for the same foreign investment, external actors, whether Beijing, Brussels, or Washington, can play them off against each other. The region's leverage comes from its collective reserves. Fragmentation undermines that leverage.
Any country, I think, would want value-added industries to be operating within their borders that can employ their workers, can create tax revenues for their state budgets. So it's natural for countries to want this refining capacity to happen within their own borders. But perhaps there's some kind of joint tax regime or joint procurement regime that could help mitigate some of the issues involved with this. Because again, natural competition, but in terms of scale, we need to probably pool resources in some fashion.
There are signs of progress. At the 7th consultative meeting of Central Asian heads of state in Tashkent last November, President Tokayev called for joining forces to attract advanced technologies and implement innovative solutions in exploration and processing. The proposal to create a regional research center for rare earth elements in Astana would consolidate geological data, coordinate exploration, and serve as a hub for innovation. The C5+1 format, the 5 Central Asian states plus the United States, offers the framework for aligning strategy and negotiating collectively with external partners. Regional organizations like the Eurasian Economic Union and the Commonwealth of Independent States provide tools for harmonizing policies and building cross-border infrastructure. But the frameworks aren't outcomes. The question is whether Central Asian governments can move from parallel national strategies to a genuinely coordinated regional approach, one that transforms raw material wealth into strategic leverage rather than a source of vulnerability. The difference matters. A region that coordinates can set terms. A region that fragments gets terms dictated to it. And there's a logistical linchpin that ties the whole picture together: Azerbaijan.
Fortunately, Azerbaijan has seen the opportunity in the Middle Corridor and has actually been expanding port capacity really quickly. I think they're going to at least double the capacity of their main port near Baku, which will make it possible to shift these goods across the Caspian and then transship them on across the South Caucasus. And for its part, Kazakhstan has been doing something very similar with its port at Aktau, expanding the capacity and capability to transport the volumes of goods that are going to make this a real thing.
Baku has positioned itself as both a transit hub and a political bridge linking Central Asia to Europe. The Middle Corridor, the trade route that carries goods from Central Asia across the Caspian and through the South Caucasus, bypasses both Russia and Iran entirely. If Central Asia is going to ship refined rare earths to Western markets, Azerbaijan is indispensable. 2 other players could strengthen this architecture. Turkey and Israel both have strong relationships with Central Asian governments and are geographically positioned to support the corridor. Aligning these interests, Ankara, Jerusalem, Baku, and Central Asia could turn regional competition into cooperation and build a supply chain that no single great power controls.
Critical minerals, if the Middle Corridor looks like a sustainable export route, that we can even see these countries move further up the value chain and start exporting industrial goods, semi-finished products that aren't only minerals to the South Caucasus, to Turkey, and even have Turkish products exported back across the Caspian to consumers in Central Asia. And so I think we could see a real virtuous cycle here, but we need to get the supply side right. We need to get the infrastructure, both hard, the physical infrastructure, the soft infrastructure like customs regimes, and then we need goods to actually flow across the corridor. And that's where I think critical minerals can be the deciding factor in does the Middle Corridor become a viable long-term export route for the region.
Rare earths are the new oil. They are the future of the global economy. The technologies that will define the 21st century, artificial intelligence, electric transport, renewable energy, precision defense, all depend on a handful of obscure metals. Whoever controls the supply chain controls the future. Right now, China controls it, and Beijing has shown repeatedly it will use that control as leverage.
I think this is going to have to be a worldwide trend here, and I think Central Asia can contribute in part to breaking this monopoly. And the positive thing is this is another reason why these Central Asian countries want refining capacity within their borders, so as not to have to essentially toll their goods to China for refinement and then come back the way Kazakhstan currently does with uranium with Russia. The Central Asian countries want to be able to refine on their own, and the world, I think particularly the US and its European allies, also wants less of a reliance on China. But I think this is going to have to be, we're going to have to look at this with critical minerals and rare earth opportunities all over the world, again, to create that supply chain resilience so that we're not relying just on one region.
Central Asia offers a realistic alternative. The reserves are enormous. The extractive expertise exists. The political will is there, and the middle corridor provides a route to the market that bypasses both Russia and China. But opportunity without investment is just geology. The competition is already underway. China has a $63 billion head start. The EU is accelerating, the US is engaging, and Central Asian governments are making their own calculations about who offers the best terms, not just in capital, but in technology transfer, processing capacity, and long-term partnership. The outcome will depend on who moves fastest and who offers the most, not in rhetoric, but in concrete commitments. Central Asia didn't choose to sit between the bear and the dragon, but it has what both of them want, and what the rest of the world increasingly needs. What happens next will shape global supply chains for decades. Thanks for watching. This video is based on analysis by Jazira Taubayeva for the Turan Research Center. We've linked the full piece in the description. Central Asia is moving from the margins to the center of the global economy. The reserves are real, the competition is intensifying, and the decisions these 5 countries make about who to partner with, how to coordinate, and whether to process domestically or export raw materials will have consequences far beyond the region. If you found this analysis valuable, subscribe and hit the notification bell. And let me know in the comments, can Central Asia really break China's grip on rare earths? Or is Beijing's head start too large to overcome?